everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Latest Thread. Our topic this time is our feather journey. So kind of like our story, as you know, I think as a long arm quilter, one of the big things that everyone wants to learn right away is how to do feathers. So I think it'll be kind of cool to hear kind of, because it's, they're not easy to learn. So, you see people's pictures online and in shows, and, I think it's sometimes as a new quilter, it can be discouraging, but, we were all there, right there with you. So
you're going to see.
Yeah. So, who's going to go first?
I'll share my screen and whoever's picture pops up first goes.
It's like a game show.
I guess I win.
Yay.
Share screen slots.
Yeah, this is kind of hard to see, and this is the back side. I have one from the front because yeah. So this was a quilt, one of my first quilt. And today, I don't have a picture of the whole quilt, but yeah, today I would make this quilt again. It was a Thimbleberries quilt, block of the month, and it had embroidered blocks. And so I wanted to try feathers, but I was brand new. So I thought, I really don't want to do feathers of my own. So what do I do? Now, mind you, this is like a king size quilt. So there was a lot of border to stitch these feathers. So what did I decide to do? I'm going to do a stencil because, yeah, anyone can follow a stencil. Well, what I didn't know that you have to backtrack, and I couldn't figure out which way the stencil was gonna be stitched continuous, because wait, it wasn't a continuous stencil. So as you can see, those feathers are atrocious. But this is the first time I did stitch feathers of any sort. So, why would I start with a king size piece with all those feathers to mark the stencils to start with? Was crazy. So, yeah.
So if you start crazy, though, it only gets easier.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that's my philosophy.
So yeah, that's the back side, and then there should be another picture of the front, because all that work, right?
You can't even see it.
Thank you, Karen. But did I know that at the time? When you're brand new, yeah, you have to really look. They still look atrocious, but yeah. So that was that.
Do you want me to rotate this or just zoom in?
You can just zoom in. There's really no rotating because they go into, well,
right,
because the bird goes in one direction. But, then yeah, is it a true progression? Probably not with the pictures. So, but doing different type of feathers, learning how to do variations of the feathers. After the stencil fiasco, I really made a point of doing, drawing a lot of the feathers and practicing a ton, because as Jody said in the introduction, we all wanted to learn how to do feathers. So I think you have to figure out for yourself which type of feather you're most comfortable, doing, and then, branch off and do variations. So, and with most designs, we encourage you to try learning the design in all directions. And that's a good example on this quilt, because you have to be able to do them based on the piecing you put them on into the different directions.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one where I wanted to do a whole cloth involving feathers. And so, it achieved a couple different things. Number one, I had to learn drawing it on graph paper, how I'm going to lay it out, so it's symmetrical because, that's done freehand. So the goal is to make it appear like it truly is symmetrical, including the feather wreath. How do I mark that? So I stay within my boundaries. So that was a good exercise for me to learn how to make it look like it's perfect. Not that, we should strive for perfection, but we challenge ourselves, to be as close to perfect as we can. And that was a good exercise for that. Karen, why are you chuckling?
Because I don't ever strive for perfection. I just hope it lands right.
Well, but, just to see if one can do it, without using a computer, I guess was a good challenge.
Yeah.
I actually, my dad used to tell me to strive for perfection, but don't expect it.
Right, right.
So you're not going to be hard on yourself, but you have to have goals, right?
I think so,
You have to have something to shoot for. Otherwise, I don't know what's the point.
you have to see how far can you stretch your abilities, and if it's always frustrating, then quit, go strive for another area. But yeah, I like a challenge.
Mhm.
Well, and this actually was back to the old stencil, but I just thought, because, at the time I didn't have a computer, could I have stitched those freehand at that point? I really didn't remember, but I know I used a stencil on that, and I just wanted to show the difference. If I'm more comfortable at using the stencil more as a guideline rather than following each line, the way it was intended, you have a much better outcome. But as I said, I felt more comfortable at doing feathers freehand. So the results from the two different stencils are, plus you can see it on there. So that helps.
Mhm.
And then on this quilt, I used the feathers as large design elements as a background fill. So, as you become more advanced, you realize, you can, feathers are, you can utilize them anywhere, whether it's obviously in a block or in a border. But if you're doing dense background fill, to have these cool design elements, and feathers again, they're so prominent, they're so beautiful, and used as a fill, you get your background fill done faster using larger design elements. And again, that can be, whatever style of feathers you're comfortable with. I like to do the formal feathers is my go-to feather, whereas some of you like to use the long arm feather as your go-to. So it doesn't matter, which style you're using. It's how you use them. And then the last picture, I love the feather wreath, along with and this was done on a leather for another challenge. But again, I love how you can stitch a feather wreath just by marking your parameters, and it looks, I don't want to say perfect because I'm sure it's not, but it's amazing, how precise and crisp it can look if just by marking your registration lines and having practiced your feathers on your journey. So
I love that color.
yeah, that was a cool color.
This is mine. So I didn't have my first pictures because it's an actual photograph, like paper taken with a camera. So it's funny because mine's a little bit different because when we got our long arm, feathers weren't on my radar. I didn't get the long arm wanting to learn how to do feathers because it wasn't that, it just wasn't that thing yet. Yes, everyone was hand quilting them and all that, but we got it because I wanted to do loops and meandering. So I want to say it was in 97, went to my very first MQS show where you could take classes. And I took a class from Linda Taylor. And that was kind of where I saw these feathers. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So extra little part of it, right? So I went home and I did it. And I'm like, wow, they weren't great, but I'm like, they're not bad. But the coolest thing was I sent the actual physical picture to Linda Taylor and I thanked her for the class. She actually responded and it was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, so that was kind of when I started so it was the chubby feather time. Like mine were always these little short, I don't know why. And the easiest way for me to do them was, so I had a template made that was this shape. It was a half circle. And I would lay it down and mark both sides. And that's how I, clearly look at them. I'm like, oh my, they're so skinny going through the border. So yeah, it's not an automatic thing, I don't think. And it's cool to see your evolution when you see. The scary thing though is when a customer has a quilt and they're like, oh yeah, you quilted this, remember way back in, and I'm like, oh gosh, put it away. Please.
Yeah.
Don't show anyone that. And then this one was not long after that other one. And it's still kind of the same. They're really these little short, stubby, I don't even know. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And all of this, it was the same. So I realized that template thing was my thing. This was the way, like a stencil kind of. So it was my, I don't know what you call it, like my safety net. Like I knew, okay, they just need to fit inside this. So I would mark these template shapes, both sides of it. And then I knew the feather had to fit in there. And that was maybe it kind of taught me how to do it because it was making me, and maybe my templates were always too skinny. That's why they're so stubby. I don't know.
But if you compare, the stencil I used for my original one, they were stubby like that, fat and short. And I guess that was just a thing, like you said,
Yeah, and I don't think, and really then it was really just long arm feathers too, is the other part of it. And people weren't really doing the backtrack ones yet. So. Then I discovered, I mean, I had been doing the backtrack feathers. Yeah. I mean, for me, I choose them the least just because I find that long arm feathers are easier. Yeah. Essentially, you're kind of backtracking, but it's a more natural flow to me. I don't know. So then I started doing the hook feathers because you could get that backtrack look without having to backtrack. So that then for a while was my most favorite style of feather. The problem with them is not a problem, but you're actually doing twice the stitching, right? So, but I do still use it. It just depends on the quilt. That's why I think it's super good to learn, or at least try. It's one thing to find your comfort feather, obviously, because then, it's fun and you like doing it, but I would try all the different styles until you find what feels right, I guess. So this is not very old. I did this not very long ago, the rest of these pictures. And I find that what I do the most with the feathers now is use them as a background fill.
Mhm.
Almost, that's almost all I use them for. Not totally, but because it's the fastest to do.
Yeah.
I mean, and it just, it fills the space, and I like to quilt a lot of lines and shapes, and it really contrasts that super well. It's, so different, but I like to save time.
Always.
Mhm.
And these are the long arm style, right?
Yeah. Although a lot of times I'll use this and the backtrack, because the backtrack I find easier to fill an odd shape,
Uh-huh.
because you're only making the top. So if I'm going along and I see I have a long space, yeah, I'll throw one backtrack in there. I don't, because in the scheme of this, no one's gonna know, what you did in there. That's a lot going on. One of the other reasons that I like the long arm ones is that if I'm doing something whimsical type of quilt, I spread them apart, because you can leave space between every feather, and it's a whole different look. It's a lot more open, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's why looking through my pictures, I realized, yeah, see, because I used them again for the background. I used them in some of those other spots, but all of them, maybe there's, I don't even know. Oh, and this is probably the last one the newest. And I mean, again, and really, I'm still using the same basic thing, right? Because I marked all those OGs and filled them with feathers, and that was my boundary. So I knew that this is where they're fitting, and
I like this one.
Yeah. For
yeah,
obvious reasons.
that was a fun one to do.
Yeah, I like how the border frame is overlapping as it goes around the square.
I like the color too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you go.
You're up.
This is my very, very first feather, and Jody calls them real nice. She says they're short and stubby. I call them butt cheek feathers. And that's all I see. And I'm like, my feathers have come a long way, but that was like I said, I'm going to conquer feathers. I think this was only a couple of weeks after getting the long arm, and I'm just like, they are not going to bother me. I'm going to conquer these things. So yeah, I made a spine, and then I just made a bunch of half of hearts and hope they kind of landed near each other. So yeah, that's an old quilt. Had a lot of love.
Yeah.
So on this one, it's probably hard to see, but I'm still doing the half hearts. I'm just not hitting my spine as hard. Like I did a true journey. I went all the way back to photos that were from the old web shots to try and find them, because that's when I did my weird feathers, but I call them weird feathers. So, but that's all freehand. Look at that big knot. Oh, I've got well, like art quilting has come a long way. I would never leave that much space open now. So, but yeah, still half heart feathers. So they're still kind of chubby feathers, but they're gaining shape.
They're getting longer.
They're getting a little longer, and they're fitting better into weird spaces.
I was going to say, you learned how to, excuse me, how to modify and account for the different spaces.
Yeah.
And overall, because you kind of use the feathers as a fill, as Jody was mentioning with her pictures, that's not the main focus. So that was a great way of practicing to get into those spaces without worrying too much.
Yeah.
It looks good.
Mhm.
I like this quilt actually.
Mhm.
It's custom quilted, but it looks like it's not so dense that it would still be nice and cuddly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then down at the bottom, I started adding more whimsical things. It's still a long arm feather, but I echoed it because everybody thinks it's like a hook feather. I'm like, that's just a long arm feather. Just put some little curlies in there. It became more adventurous. They're still half hearts, but they're stretching a little better.
They're getting taller.
And then I said, hey, if I can just do a giant meander, I can just do a giant meandered feather. So that's when they started they're still fat. They're still fat feathers, but they're getting much more sprawly.
And you're adding more details in too.
Well, I learned that the little, scrollies can fill the spots that you can't reach with the feather.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a really good way to learn. You know how when you first start and they're curved and you're trying to learn and it has to do, you learn what it has to do in there in the
Yep.
sharp bends. It just kind of comes to, with time.
It becomes natural.
Yeah, and this is a super good way to learn that, I think. I mean, because you have to leave room. You have to remember that when you're here, these ones also have to come here. So
Mhm. Yeah. So, and this is closer to Nal's feathers, but I've learned.
Sharon's feathers on Slim Fast.
Well, I do a lot of feathers, so to condense it into only a few pictures, there's some gaps there. But then I learned how to nest them so that they look like they're going over top of other ones, and feathers became more fun.
It's beautiful.
And really good fabric helps too, to show off your feathers.
I think without your name there, I'd be able to tell that those were your feathers.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So this is more Nal feathers.
I'm going to zoom in. There we go.
And I love to make feathers flow and sprawl and just that movement of feathers. Like these are all, hand guided, and they're all similar, but they're different.
And you used it like a gold or a yellow thread.
It's like a creamy yellow.
It's really pretty. Makes them stand out just a little bit more than if you'd used the matching thread, right?
Yeah, I think it's like maybe 1 or 2 shades deeper than the fabric. That's it.
And I think that's great too, because the Jody Niemeyer, like the QuiltWorks quilts, like this one, sometimes they're really challenging to try to figure out what to do in those big spaces. And you've just made it so simple for other people to look at it and go, if I can just draw some big wavy vines,
Yep,
and let the feathers crawl everywhere. Yeah, it's pretty. Oh, speaking of feathers, yuck. These are mine. These are my first feathers, and I still have that quilt. This is actually the inside of a circle with this arc, and I don't know. Don't think that if you're for your first feather that you should try one on the inside of a circle. One of the harder things to do. And I really liked when I saw a picture of Jody's earlier, that when you were going through the inside of that curve, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but you were starting to flatten out a little bit, and then you just made a big, nice spiral curl. And then when you came out of it, it was like, oh, now we're fine. Mm-hmm. And you're able to continue on instead of getting into a rough spot. So I really liked that.
Did you guys ever notice? So when you're new, I thought if there's a feather on this side, there has to be one, like they have to be. Mm-hmm. And then finally I realized like it was a circle. It can't happen.
Yeah.
Because the inside ones have to be a totally different shape. And it was like, oh my gosh, yeah. I'm over here trying to make them be always two.
Yeah. And I think that that's what I tried to do here. And that's why I took a picture of the close-up of this spot, because I was trying to put, okay, there's one there, trying to match them up. And then I just got into trouble and overlap them. But I started with what I call a finger feather, where there's a little bit of space in between them, like your hand, right? Where you can visibly see that space so that you don't have to be as concerned about hitting the backtrack as perfectly. And so my goal was to continue to do the finger feathers, and as I go, just every quilt, try to get them a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer until my backtrack was right on that line. And I didn't even try the bump back feathers until this one. So that's a bump back feather. And the backtrack's not terrible, but I think I probably quilted it really, really slow. And it's been washed, so that you can see all the wrinkles, and washed and used lots. But yeah, I did. That was my first backtrack one, and they were really big. And that's one of the things that I think we struggle with too, is sometimes we're making them too big. And if we're struggling, maybe size them down a little bit, or the reverse can be true as well. If you're making them too small, try making them a little bit bigger. And I don't know, I didn't love these, but this was pretty big. So like, that's like, these blocks were 9 inches. So that's pretty big feathers.
Yeah.
Pretty big and chunky. And that's a long ways to get that backtrack perfect. So, and then, and so I was drawing my spines, up until, this is a little bit more recent. I think we have like a little gap, each of us. We have this little space missing in our timeline that just kind of, I don't know where our pictures are, but I kind of went from drawing my spines to not drawing a spine, and then just using the back of a bigger feather as a spine for the other side to get a nice curve going through. And I believe these are bump back feathers. I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, because I can't see an extra line of stitching along the inside edge, but at some point I continued to try them, and I really like you guys have already said, it's a really good idea to have more than one feather that you can go to, because some of your spaces are different, and sometimes you just need one feather, and so you can do a long arm feather, and sometimes you need space or have enough space for 2 feathers, so then you can do a bump back feather. So you can be versatile and go back and forth and have those same different, or the different kinds of feathers in the same space. So and then I started getting a little bit better, more confident with the bump back feathers, with my backtracking. And the more your fabric is going to show off your quilting, I felt like I wanted my backtrack to be up here, not in here. It was just much less noticeable if you were off a little bit. So, and then started experimenting with some fun curls in there. And I think that I did the same thing. My feathers were like, my first feathers, they didn't really look like feathers, like the chubby phase. They just looked kind of like balloons on sticks, you know, just kind of sticking out there. And then they just kind of all of a sudden start to slim out. And yeah. And then this is a leather piece, and these are really, really tiny feathers. Like this little feather here is probably 1/4 of an inch big. And then it's, I don't know, like I feel like I have this competition or challenge with myself. How slim and beautiful can I get them, and long, and how far can I go before they look too skinny, right? And then this is quilting on, this is an embroidered quilt, and it's a satin fabric. And so I knew if I made any mistakes, I wouldn't be able to really rip out. You'd see those holes. And if my backtrack was off again, you'd see it. So this one, you can see I did a really, really close echo, because there were a few spots. There was a fly in here. Sorry, just kind of went in front of my face. If my backtracks were off, and they were off a little bit here and there, then that really, really close echo just hid them.
Yeah.
So I don't remember where I learned that trick, but I really appreciated it because it just made it more forgiving to do this kind of quilting. And this one is actually the long arm style feathers. So I do go back and forth. As you can see, there's a little bit of space in between them here and there. Maybe that's probably the best spot to show that there is some space. And I didn't use the backtrack feathers or the bump back feathers. So I do go back and forth between the two of them, but I think there's always one that kind of seems to be your go-to.
Well, and I
And-
think,
Go ahead.
I think the long arm feather like that, because you have that double line, and like I never backtrack right on myself. So there's almost always a double line. I
Mhm.
think it gives them more depth, especially like this with a solid fabric. You get that real curvature look.
Yeah,
Just-
it deepens that's
Yes.
that little line in between them, right? Because
Yeah.
that's well, and visually you see that more because that's where you see more of a shadow.
Yep.
So,
And I
and
would
did-
say
go ahead.
the same as Karen. I wouldn't say, I don't strive to backtrack on that inside on a long arm. Because I generally actually am just leaving a space.
Mhm.
Whether it's super narrow, sometimes I don't, because I think in the scheme of it, I mean, your average person isn't going to go down this and be like, oh, wait, there's this one here and this one's there. And there was, a fraction of an inch here. Like, I think, and it's the same with size, because I don't generally like mine to have to all be the same. I like them to all be different because
Mhm.
you don't have to stress as much when you stitch it. And I love the movement. It looks more, I don't know, flowy or something. So yeah, I don't know. I think we beat ourselves up sometimes too
Oh,
much
way too much. Yeah.
when it's not, you know.
Well, for me, I exclusively do the traditional feathers, but in a border, I don't strive to make them look the same, because I agree, you want them to be, organic looking, because then they look more attractive in my mind. What, Jody?
Sharon's.
Sharon's got wiggle issues behind her.
Yeah, my dog is just happy that Dad has come home, so he's come to tell me about it.
But I think getting back to what you were saying with the space in between the long arm feathers, where you say it creates a little space if you're not backtracking, I guess that's essentially the same effect than what Sharon was showing, where she added the tiny echo around the top of the feathers, just to create that, depth and to emphasize that. So I think it really just depends where you put the feathers, and I like the uniform look in like a feather wreath, because, that's just the traditional look, whereas in the border, I never try to make them the same look.
Yeah, somebody gave me some advice once that like feathers they're supposed to be like an organic looking, or like leaves or something, where they don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. And when I realized I had that freedom to just make each side unique, then yeah, it just really opened it up.
Yeah, that's, I think, part of the thing too, is that I think as quilters, because we exposed to so much, you online, there's never ending pictures. And I think you see these things, well, mine don't look like hers. They should be, but it's not like,
Mhm.
it can be, I think you have to find your own deal. This is how I do them. So that's just it,
Yeah, like this, like everybody just in this half an hour has seen from our beginning to our end of our feathers. They're not just, they just started following us and they see our current feathers. I want to do that. Well, yeah, give yourself 10, 15 years and you'll do that. That's I'm glad you picked this episode, because it's good for people to see that. Like, our feathers didn't look like this when they were first starting, nothing.
No.
Well, and not only that, but I think too, um, you as a quilter, most people as a quilter evolve.
Yep.
Like what you liked then or how you did them then, you learned something new. Oh, I like these ones, now this is my go-to. And,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
I still always go back and do your other ones too.
Yeah, what I really enjoyed when we did the tour in 2019 was when we were sharing the different styles of feathers, that all of a sudden one of them would click for somebody and they were just like, whereas before they were like, I can't do this, I can't do this, and I can't do this. And then they just keep trying different kinds. And then all of a sudden one would be like, this is my jam, this is my feather. And that's probably would be my biggest piece of advice is if you're struggling, just keep trying different styles and kinds of them, because one of them is going to click. And then you're going to be like, super on fire about feathers.
Well, and I think too, you ever watch, you watch videos and stuff, and I'll see someone doing their feathers and they do them like a totally different way. Like instead of doing them like that, they go to the top to the bottom, which I could never, no way. I couldn't, because that's not, and then people in the class will say, but that wasn't the path. That wasn't what you showed, but that's okay. Whatever you do and you get the result you want, go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Okay, so that was fun, huh?
That was a lot of fun.
Okay, everyone, we're going to take a quick break and we will be back with the ideas for your quilt segment. See you then.
Hello, this is Mary from Gammill. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you purchase a tour class from the Gammill website. First, you open up your web browser and go to gammill.com. Then click on Education and Support, and then click Online Education. Scroll down a little bit until you come to Browse and Purchase Classes. You can browse through them, but for this one, I'm going to click on a hand-guided class. I'm going to choose Fill It Fast and say Add to Cart. Now you can add as many as you'd like, but for this one I'll just go on to Checkout. This is the screen that you will add your information. Sometimes it might autofill for you, but it's very important that you have an updated email and that you create an account password. Then click Continue to Payment. This screen is where you will add your payment information. After you have verified that everything is correct on your screen, click the I have read and agreed to the complete terms and conditions, and then click Place Order. You will then be directed to the Confirmation Received page, and after 10 seconds, it will automatically take you to the next page. This will show you that your account has been created, and you will need to go to your email to find your username so you can log in. So open up your email and find the one that says your account has been created. Scroll down and there you will find your username. Click back on the tab to open up the previous page and use the link that says click here to access your classes. Then type in your username that you found from your email and the account password that you created, and click Login. This page will show you the list of classes that you have purchased, and you can click on one, and there it is. Have fun creating!
Welcome back, everyone. We are ready now to do the ideas for your quilt segment. And today we have Naomi with us, and she's brought a really beautiful quilt for us to give her ideas for. Naomi, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, just kind of like where you're at, how long you've been quilting, and then also about your quilt, of course.
Sure. I started making quilts probably when I was a teenager. My father was an executive for the Boy Scouts, so he always had me making neckerchiefs, and there was always scraps, and so started sewing those. And then I had kids pretty quickly, and they all got baby quilts, and then I found that quilting for me was really a great creative outlet. And I made a little bit of money when my kids were little with it. But for me, it's really just a comfort and a joy to work with fabric and color, of course. The quilt that I sent to you for some help on, I started as a, let's try English paper piecing and see what that looks like. So the middle there is a little bit muddy. That's what I started with. And then all of a sudden it just started taking shape into this star. So I hand pieced it pretty much on trains, planes, and automobiles before the pandemic started. And then I added the blue around the outside. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it in that hexagon shape. I think it probably would be more useful if I square it up. But yeah, I do have a Gammill Premier Plus and would love some ideas on how to finish it.
How long did it take you start to finish?
I think I worked on it off and on for about 6 years.
Wow.
Yep. So you can see I have a little bit of rippling in that solid blue border, but I can work on that.
Okay, so you ready to see our ideas for you?
Oh, I'm so excited. My goodness.
Well, so that is my version, and I had a couple of considerations. I really didn't know what level of quilting you were at. We didn't have that information, so I don't know what kind of quilting you do. So I figured, well, I'll just don't worry about that and just start drawing. So I like feathers. So as you can see, there's a feather theme going on. We also didn't know the scale of some of those design elements, those diamond shapes, how big they are. So that's a little bit of a, struggle when we're drawing those because, if you don't know what size they are, you don't know if the design's actually going to work. But all that aside, so what I thought, because it's hand pieced, and I thought, I would do those lines through the hexagon. So anywhere you see the lines, they go through the center of the hexagons. And outside the medallion, I just really followed with, spacing that fits right inside in the center of the hexagon. So it's super easy to connect if you're using your ruler because you don't need to mark anything. You literally just follow from point to point. And obviously, depending on this, how big are the hexagons? Are they 1 inch?
I think they're 1.5 inches on the sides.
Okay, so yeah, like I said, that's a little bit tricky, but obviously you can add more lines. I just wanted to separate the center medallion part from the outer border, and so I thought that would work well. And then, choose a theme, which in my case was the feathers, and then the curly cues to kind of highlight the diamonds as well as the star points. And then just draw the wavy line or spine in the diamonds, and your feathers going around, a feather, design in the center, and then pull it all together in the border. So there's only a couple designs, but I added the pebbles, and the star points, which goes well with the curly cues as well as the rounded shape of the feather. So I thought it looks cohesive the way it's drawn, and it's actually fairly easy to execute if you are, a feather kind of gal.
Sure, I do love feathers. And Eva, would you do some thread color changes in there?
Probably not. I'm not a big thread changer, but that's a preference, what I just think that way you can move through the different areas all at once. And because of the blues, I don't know. I mean, what do you generally like to do?
I'm not a big thread color changer myself.
What good? Well, my go-to is usually a gray because that just takes on the color of the fabric. You know, it goes really well in regards to the shade. You know, have to play because you have, even in your blues, other than the border, you have a variety of blue shades. Some of them look gray, you know, so I think it would work really well. You know, if nothing else, maybe, you know, match um the blue as close or blend, you know, in the outer border, because you know that's probably the only place where I would change the color if need be, because the background, the border just really is in the background in my mind, because you want to just focus your eye on that, you know, center medallion with all the colors.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, this one's mine. And it looks, you know, after I was done drawing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks like so much. But I think it's just because it's the white drawing.
Right.
I'm going to rotate that actually. I'm going to rotate so that the drawing is on the top. That might be easier for. Is that better?
Dizzy for a second.
Sorry, it's just that way we can zoom in a little bit better and see more of it on the screen.
So what I did, we'll just start in the middle. So I used some lines just to kind of separate some areas. And I would probably do like a 1/2 inch line, just because then you'll actually see it, I think, and it'll give you that break. And I only picked a few places. So the center star, I treated as one. And I was trying, I'm zooming in on the hexagons to try to see how they were laid out, because I usually like to go, you know, when you have the point, I like to stitch from this to this side and leave the point not stitch, just, I don't know, because then you can hit that one hexagon twice.
Right.
But whichever one works out, because it's really just going to depend on your layout. And I chose to break it at the yellow because it's the most vibrant thing, and it's really going to draw your eye to that.
Mhm.
And I just randomly, and I left one just empty, marked just kind of freehand. And when it's oriented the other way, which was how I drew it, because you have the Premiere, your space is a little bit limited.
Right.
So, because that's what I stitched on a Premiere for years. And so that's kind of why I do it the way I do it, because I was so used to doing that. So you'll notice by the spine, I broke that up and did the top half of the star and then a spine to fill in the bottom half. So you'd be able to fill the top and then advance and fill the bottom without it, you know, and it still all blends together.
Right.
And then I just, same thing. I echo, you know, 2 lines to mark where those diamonds are. And I filled the whole thing with the same kind of a leaf, ferny leaf.
Mhm.
And then all around the rest of it, I would do a meander, because I personally I know a lot of people don't like meandering, but I think it just is like a mask. So it's quilted, it's nondescript, you don't really notice it. So that lets the other parts, like the diamonds and the star, kind of be the attention.
Mhm.
And then, you know, I went around the outside, picked out a section, kind of defined it, and put that same leaf in there to, you know, make it all work together. And then on the outside, I would mark in little ghost hexagons.
I love that.
I mean, I think, well, and for me, because the more of them you put in there, the less of the fill you need to do, which is always a good thing. And I would put up is like just random, totally random. You could even do bigger ones, smaller ones. I guess you just wouldn't want them to get too big, because if there's not going to be quilting in there,
Right. Right.
you know, and I think they'd really pop out and just kind of be that little extra thing you notice in the background area.
That is terrific, Jody.
Yeah, I like it.
Mhm.
It's funny when we start drawing them. I always just want to do a part and then it's like, but wait, I need to see what it's going to look like.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That one's mine. So I think we all did a similar kind of theme here. But it's a very prominent star on that quilt. So I outlined the outside of the star, and then I made faux diamond shapes and put feathers in them.
Uh-huh.
I left that area of relief around the yellow as well, and around the side diamonds, put a feather in there. And I went all the way around. I'm trying to point with my mouse and I don't have one.
I'll see if I can follow along with your brain and point.
So I did the curly cues to make that part of the background recede. And
Okay.
then I went around the entire center with another area of relief and kind of pushed it out into the blue. Yeah, right there. Thank you, Sharon.
I love that little diamond.
Yeah, I
Between
like
little
that.
point, it really, I don't know, it changes it out a
Mhm.
lot.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then there's one more area of relief out in the border. And then I just did straight line because it's easy and it holds down all of those hexes. So, and then just a feather around the outside. I thought about thread color on this for a while, and I decided I would do blue in the blue and orange everywhere else.
Uh-huh.
I just like that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so that was that.
Yeah, and really, if you
Much.
did change colors, I would probably go do all the blue.
I would do the blue first. It's the most.
Yeah, and then you could
holding
go
it.
back through the entire quilt if you changed your thread and do the rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because really the only thing that I would do in orange is like the red diamond shapes, and then in the center star. Everything else would be blue. I like this quilt.
Thank you so much. I love it.
Okay, and the last one is mine. And okay, so if we start in the center, the black lines that you see here are just kind of a registration mark line, and you only see it on half so that you can at least, it doesn't distract from the quilting design itself. So if you mark crosshairs all the way across the this center hexagon, then you can make a leaf shape that sits inside the space where those black lines are. And then I put an S curve, just a little bit of a vine in there, and not knowing as well what the scale of those were, I left this plain, but if your pieces were quite large, you could tuck a few feathers, maybe just a couple, 2 or 3 on the side where the opening is the widest, like this part right here, and maybe one little leaf or a feather or something up on that top side where there's a bit more space. So, and then echoed it twice in here. Then I filled around that with a bit of a meander, but just because, like with everyone else, we're seeing the spaces need to be defined. And sometimes it's really difficult with a hexagon quilt because there's no actual straight lines and the seams aren't all going in one
Right.
way. So you kind of have to make your own definition. And I chose to go I drew it first with just 1 hexagon space. And with the size that yours are, 1 space might be fine, but you could go with the 2 and I think it would still be. So I did 2 rows of them and I like the meander too. Like Jody said, it's really simple and it's not going to take away from the beauty of your quilt to begin with. So then I chose for the feathers to do an alternating kind of bit of a leaf with a point on them, just to break it up. So we've got a curl and then a leaf with a point, and then a curl and a leaf with a point, just to kind of go with the whole garden idea that there's, leaves and flowers and beautiful things going on. In the diamonds, I borrowed the S shape and just exaggerated a little bit more. So we actually have almost a figure 8 if you were to close that. So that's how you could draw it, is just by drawing a nice big S and then add your feathers to that. And the ones that come out into the tip would be the ones that I would add those leaf feathers with the little pointy tip
Right.
on them.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, because sometimes when like feathers are awesome, but they're challenging when you have to put them into unusual spaces. And so it's like, how do you fit that into a diamond nicely? And so I thought, I think I'm going to use that on a quilt because I like it. I haven't quilted that before. I just drew it and I liked it. So, and then separated the space again out here with more meandering and some straight lines through there just to give it a nice frame. Because I knew I wanted to put feathers in that background. And this is following that same S shape with the curl, a big one in the corner, and then you would get smaller as you went around the sides of your hexagon. I don't think we see the whole quilt in this picture, right? Like, but it is a hexagon shape.
It is hexagon shaped, but
Yeah. So you might want to just play around with your placement of them, and you can angle them and make the side ones a little bit smaller than the ones that you put in the corner. And whether or not you decide to put the little curl in the feathers or not is totally up to you.
right.
So, and I would do the same as Karen. I would use 2 different colors of thread. I would probably use like a warm gold throughout everywhere that the red and the yellow is, and the green. And then I would switch to like a purpley blue, something like that, that looked nice out in the outside edge. If you use the same color throughout, you're going to have something maybe a little bit darker on the yellow, and it would show up a little bit lighter on the dark background. So you've got to decide how much you're comfortable with your quilting showing. And a busy quilt like this is great to do things that you aren't as comfortable with because they may not show as well, but they're really going to show on the solids. So I probably would change the color of thread for out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. I'm just blown away because just hearing your comments, now I realize why I was struggling so much. Where to go, you know? It's so strong all by itself. So really, really helpful.
And you want to do pretty quilting, but you don't want it to take away from all the beautiful work that you've done too. So
Right, right. Oh my gosh, it's just mind blowing. I'm thrilled with all of them, and I'll probably put a practice piece on my machine and maybe draw some of those diamonds and play around with that because I quilt probably maybe 10 quilts a year, so I really do need more practice.
Well, thanks so much for coming and sharing your quilt with us.
Yes,
And challenging us for sure, because we're like, oh my, that's a big quilt.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a delight to get your comments and look at your beautiful drawings.
Well, and we hope that when you quilt it, please go on, share your pictures with us. We'd love to see what you do.
Alrighty, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Naomi, nice to meet you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope that you have enjoyed hearing our feather stories and seeing all the ideas we had for Naomi's quilt. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.